Coming. It is absolutely amazing for so many of you to set up this room. This is our biggest event this year, and I think it probably will be one of our best. I'm just going to start by just giving everyone a big thanks, and then Nat, who's the chaplain of the EC. Sorry, I should say. My name's Steve. I will be the next president of the ExeAHS next year. This is Nat, who's the current president of the ECU. First of all, I just want to start by thanking so many people. First of all, the ECU, of course, for helping us get this debate set up. Second of all, Ian, who's going to be chairing our debate. Ian Martin is a chaplain for the University of Exeter. And finally, just thanks to Ben, who's filming this event. Hopefully, any of you have the desire to watch this event afterwards, or if any of you are going to be watching this a week after it happened. A big thanks goes out to Ben for making that possible. I'm just going to pass it over to Nat to explain how the Twitter feed is going to work for tonight.
Just like to add my welcome. Great to see so many of you here. We'd love for you to get involved in the event throughout the night. So if during the speeches you have a question, you'll be able to tweet in. The hashtag is XGod. So tweet in your questions, and then we'll also have a time open questions where I'll be roaming around with the mic. So you have that opportunity as well. I'm going to hand over to Ian now, and he's going to explain the format of the debate and then lead us into it.
Right, thanks very much. So somebody said, are you a full-time chaplain? And yes, I am, but only on Thursdays. Other times I do other things, and somebody said, you must be completely mad to volunteer to sit between these good young people with some very different views, but to let you know, I'll be okay, because for 10 years I was a member of the City Council, so I'm a politician, and I'm used to this sort of thing. So, here's the format, because we want to get on. Thanks for the introduction, guys. So, this house believes that God is a delusion. Now, VegSoc have people who count. So I've got a timekeeper over there, but I need people who count, because I'm not going to count. So I need two people one person over there. Can you count? You're going to do the counting, yeah? And then the person on that side in the blue, can you count? You're going to stay to the end? Yeah? Okay. Right, so we're going to do the vote. The first initial vote then. Yeah? This house believes that God is a delusion. You can vote for, you can vote against, or you can abstain. So, votes for, please. Hands up. Hands up. And if the two counters can stand up, oh, you've delegated it. Okay. Shout out the figures and we'll see if you get them the same. Got to keep them up.
Okay, I got 41.
I have 32.
We'll go 35, yeah. Okay, so those against the motion. This house believes that God is not a delusion.
Okay, I got 74.
I have 81.
Let's go 2 to 1. And abstentions, please.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So, yeah, so 2 to 1 against, yes, this be in favour. No, 2 to 1 against, and about an equal number of abstentions. That will do to start with. So, can the timekeeper put your hand up? So, just put your hand up. That's my timekeeper. So this is how we're going to go. We're going to go 5 minutes this side, 5 minutes this side, 5 minutes this side, another 5 minutes this side, then half an hour. I'm going to get this signal when there's 25 minutes, and they've got 5 minutes to go. And after half an hour, we have 2 minutes, and 2 minutes, and then we take the vote again, but you can't abstain. You have to vote for or against. So when we get to the questions bit, somebody will leap up with this roving mic, and I will grab one of these ones. I think we're a bit under-resourced for mic, but we'll manage, because you can't really hear otherwise. Now, don't try and shout, because you do need a mic. It makes a lot of difference. We'll share the mics down here nicely, and the object is that you find something new. Find something new about what you think, what somebody else thinks. That's my view. That's why I came. Okay? Who's on first? So, Julian.
To start off by echoing Steve's thanks to everyone here, ECU, Martin, for agreeing to host and be part of this debate. And thank you all for coming. I hope we can have an enjoyable and utterly discordant evening. Now, the title of tonight's debate is "This House Believes that God is a Delusion." Now, by delusion, this side does not mean that belief in God is some sort of psychological disorder, or it is a false belief and that it is unfounded. It's not a psychological disorder because everyone experiences cognitive dissonance. If you smoke and you know that smoking is bad for your health, you're experiencing cognitive dissonance. Similarly, I propose that anyone who looks at the world and claims that there is a God who either superintends it or created it is experiencing cognitive dissonance because there is no evidence within the world that such a God exists. That being said, the only God who does not contradict with historical and scientific evidence is a deistic God of the gaps. Now by that I mean a God who created the world and then vanished. No more interference, nothing else to talk about. This side obviously won't be defending that kind of God, so I'm going to address the arguments that I think I'll put forward in favour of Christian God. These arguments can be divided into about three categories. Arguments about the Bible, arguments about morality, and arguments about design. I'm going to leave morality mostly to Ollie, because he's a philosopher and they spend their lives worrying about that sort of thing. So to start with the Bible, I think the first thing to note is that, hopefully anyone who's read the Bible has realised this, it is an obvious product of human imagination. The contradictions, the stories themselves, and the character of God all point towards the Bible's creativeness. Now, it was certainly written by intelligent and poetic people, but these people were writing in the Iron Age, and that primitivity shows itself in the Bible's morality and its lack of scientific understanding. I mean, this is a book that condones slavery, persecution of women and homosexuals. If it was divinely inspired or dictated by a benevolent, omniscient, omnipresent God, you'd hope to find something scientific that the people who were writing it wouldn't have understood on their own. Germ theory, that would be quite helpful for God to tell us about, wouldn't it? Or DNA. Think how that's revolutionised our understanding of ourselves and of the world. Michael Green wrote what I think is quite a funny book, but the ECU hands it out at its events, so they might not think it's quite so comical, called Jesus for Skeptics. And in it, he claims that if the miracles of Jesus cannot be proven, then Christianity falls down. And that sounds good to me, because, ladies and gentlemen, there is no proof that such miracles occurred. However, let's take him up on his challenge and assume that the miracles did exist. Does that prove a Christian God? Of course not. You only have to look at many traditions that are pre-Christian, such as the Roman gods, Mithras, or the Egyptian gods, Osiris. These people, these heroes and gods, bear an uncanny resemblance to Jesus. There are people rising from the dead, there are disciples, and there are his healing of the sick. So all that Jesus' miracles would prove, if he had conducted them, which he didn't, is that he's some sort of magician or sorcerer in the tradition of many pre-Christian religions. So I've touched on morality already, and as I said, I'm going to leave that mostly to Ollie. But if we assume that the Christian God isn't evil, which I think is debatable, then he's certainly inept. you'll often find defenders of this God wheeling out the fine-tuning argument. This argument goes something along the lines of, this world was created and the conditions for life in it are just right, so God must exist. But you only have to look at newspaper headlines almost every day to see stories about global warming, scarcity of food, and overpopulation. This earth is not designed to sustain us. Obviously the rebuttal to that is God created the world perfect, but then we screwed it up. But if that's the case, why have 98.8% of all species that have ever existed on this planet gone extinct? Humans are only responsible for 50% of those. The average lifespan of a mammalian species such as ours is 3 million years. Everything that we know about this world suggests that we're not going to be around forever. And even if we do survive a few thousand years, a few 100,000 years, what happens when the sun explodes? That's a pretty bad design that consigns us to oblivion and everything else on this planet with us. So I hope that these arguments, I've only been able to sketch them out because of the limited time, but I hope that these arguments have suggested to you that the Christian God was made in our image rather than him being made in ours. Is that time up, or have I got a minute left? Time up.
That's it.
Okay.
Okay, so to Chris.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you also to my learned friends on the proposition for the hard work that you put into preparing for tonight, particularly at the sharp end of term, and for that particularly piercing opening statement. Let me start. If Christ has not been raised, then our preaching is in vain, and your faith is in vain. If Christ has not been raised, then our preaching is in vain, and your faith is in vain. This is what the Bible says about delusion. If Jesus is not alive, then I am delusional. I'll concede defeat now, and we can hit the ground running. However, I will put it to you tonight that Jesus Christ is alive. When I first came to university, I would have been a vocal supporter. The thing that brought me to the other side of the table was being presented with the notion that religion could be true, specifically Christianity. I'd never considered this before. Christianity lives or dies, is proved true or delusional on the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I've quoted the Bible twice already tonight, and Julian's already addressed some concerns with it, so let me first justify my use of it. First, a few misconceptions. The New Testament manuscripts weren't written hundreds of years after 0 AD, but within one generation. Secondly, copies of these manuscripts were not heavily edited by a long line of dodgy priests and monks, but rather the translations we have today come from copies only 1 or 2 generations after the original. To give those of you unfamiliar with ancient history, I'm one of them, but I've done some research, some context. Plato's writings are dated about 400 BC, but our earliest manuscript copies of his work come from about AD 900. That's a gap of 1,300 years. Moreover, we have only 7 copies of these. Remember those numbers, 1,300 years gap and 7 copies. Compare these to the New Testament writings, dating from about 50 to 100 AD, and our earliest copies of it date to 114 AD. That's a gap of 50 years. And we have 5,366 copies. We don't dispute the accuracy of Plato's accounts, despite the 1,300 year gap and only having 7 copies, but many of you will reject the New Testament accounts, despite the gap being 50 years, and us having 5,366 copies. That's 1,300 versus 50, and 7 versus 5,366. The New Testament is reliable. If this doesn't convince you, consider the fact that non-Christian contemporary sources confirm much of the New Testament writing. The writings of the Roman Tacitus particularly confirm Jesus' existence, his life, his crucifixion, and his resurrection, as do the Jewish writings of Josephus. These are both hostile sources, whose interests are to quash Christianity, not to confirm it, so their support is especially weighty. Equally, let's consider the eyewitness accounts that we find in the New Testament. The first witnesses to the resurrection are women. If one was trying to launch a new religion by fabricating evidence for Jesus' resurrection, one would use respected men, maybe Romans, maybe priests, maybe a governor or two. Certainly not a small group of women whose testimony counted half of that of men in a Jewish court. Next, the women themselves who approached Jesus' tomb on that morning only to find it empty, came expecting Jesus to be dead. We read in the Gospel accounts that they went to the tomb with spices that they had prepared to embalm or to prepare the body. They were expecting a dead body. They were expecting a dead Jesus. These are not gullible morons full of foolish hope. These are not scheming women trying to launch a new religion. These are not believing, expectant, wishful witnesses. These women arrive full of doubt. These women leave convinced. These are reliable witnesses. Finally, consider similarly the response of the disciples. When Jesus is arrested, they flee, they scatter, they deny they ever knew Jesus, and they lock themselves in a house, fearful of the Jews. When Jesus appears to them after his resurrection, the accounts record that they doubted. Do you remember doubting Thomas? Wouldn't believe until he'd actually touched Jesus? Again, these are not gullible witnesses, but skeptics that need convincing. And are they convinced? Well, again, let's look at the accounts. We see that after Jesus appears to them, after his resurrection, they are transformed men. From doubting, denying, fearful cowards, to men willing to die for proclaiming that Jesus is God. Nothing accounts for the personal transformation not only of the disciples, but of hundreds of men and women. From quivering cowards to missionaries confident and ready to die. Nothing accounts for this except that they had seen Jesus alive. So, to conclude, if Jesus is risen, God is no delusion. We can be sure beyond all reasonable doubt of the resurrection of Jesus because of the content of the accounts, the credibility of the witnesses, and the authenticity of the extant manuscripts. God is no delusion.
You're right.
Sorry.
To be fair, he's doing techie as well, isn't he?
Apologise for that. I'd just like to start first by addressing some of the points just briefly made before moving on to what I believe perhaps to be the most convincing argument against belief in God. I certainly don't think that we can have a particularly meaningful discussion about the historicity of Jesus. I think that's sort of an area which we can have reasonable disputes about. I don't think any of us doubt that either. We can say, yes, Jesus perhaps did live, but we can dispute perhaps the sources. So I'm sceptical about the ontological status of God, and I am also sceptical of the scepticism. I don't believe that the question, does God exist, is particularly meaningful in question. It is an empty question. I don't think we can have a very plausible answer. So I want to move beyond a simple discussion of whether God does exist or does not, to ask whether belief in God is justifiable or defensible. I think that's the point of the debate. God is delusion. So I think what's important to frame this discussion is perhaps to look at, since miracles were mentioned, the reasons for believing in God's existence. I'm prepared to justify the will to believe. I think that we can discuss faith, and I think many secular sources do give very good defences of faith. So that's not where I wish to have my attack. Indeed, 72% of 2,250 adults surveyed online between November 13th and 18th believe in miracles. I think a positioning of faith, of religion, in that area is much better than a discussion of rituals. I think faith does start from religious beliefs, beliefs in miracles, and not simply from organised religion. But I do have doubts, and this is where I now, I think, defend the proposition. It is clear that the proposition is so interpreted, whereby what we mean when we say that God is delusion is not simply the empirical evidence for his existence is surely unconvincing. I don't think that's enough to dissuade our opponents. What I do think is a particularly good argument, particularly cogent argument, is it is the Christian God. I think it's important to frame it as Christian, because of course, as we mentioned, there are many other gods. Is the Christian God a particularly good God? Is he a moral God? There is an immense amount of suffering in the world. If God is omnibenevolent, and if he is omnipotent, then why does he allow for this suffering? Last year, 4,300 pigs died in a County Armagh blaze. Doesn't seem to be much justification. If indeed you think that suffering is necessary perhaps, which is sometimes the defence given. I can't see why 4,300 pigs died in a factory farm blaze is an action of a particularly good God. This is of course relatively insignificant when we compare it to the millions of animals who die in factory farms every year. So perhaps we might say it's because we have free will, this is why suffering is allowed. I don't think that really addresses the problem. Perhaps you can imagine a foal in a forest fire. Why should a foal in a forest fire be expected to burn excruciatingly and die on its own? There doesn't seem to be much of a plausible explanation or justification for that. So I think we have to frame the debate into what sort of obligations do we have towards others? Are we justified in behaving as we do? There's a very good passage from the Bible, of course, give unto Caesar what you owe to Caesar. But is this terrible? We must admit surely that there are at least some instances where it is not right to give unto Caesar. Slavery, unjust wars, all of which are condoned in the Bible. So if God is omnibenevolent, why should we obey unjust governments? So we have, I believe, a certain responsibility to understand the nature of our moral beliefs, particularly since our actions have obvious consequences. Moral beliefs about the world, despite what may be said, are not especially Christian. Indeed, they predate the Judeo-Christian tradition. Examples of texts in Egypt, Mesopotamia, India, and of course Greece as well. Indeed, there is evidence of moral behaviour among other primates, but I expect you would be less willing to concede this point. There are, of course, competing claims as well, which is the point I'm making. The Jain believes just as sincerely in his strict vegetarianism as most Christians do not. How are we to navigate these sort of borders? Can we have morality without God? Well, I think we can. It might be argued that without God, anything is permissible. But I don't think this follows. I think a moral principle ought to be universalizable. So perhaps we can say, well, there is no God. How are we to be moral? Or we can say, provided it's universalizable, we can act by it as if it were objective. Moral behaviour must, of course, be distinguished from purely selfish behaviour. So perhaps there are some problems with morality without God. I think there are perhaps some sincere and well-placed intentions. We can say, well, if there is no God, then perhaps morality is determined by evolutionary psychology. Perhaps we can say, well, no one is really free. I think there are some problems with that account. I don't believe that moral beliefs are determined by what is evolutionarily advantageous. I don't think it's a serious subject. So I will just conclude there, but I will go further into this discussion. Sorry.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, my learned friends on the proposition. My name is Isaac, and I'm a Christian here studying physics. Chris has endeavoured to outline the core of the Christian faith, the cross and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. If the claims of the Bible stand or fall, the battleground will be in the legal argumentation of this claim. I would like to also suggest, though, that belief in Jesus Christ as God is a rational response to the evidence available. That the Christian faith is intellectually fulfilling as well as emotionally satisfying. I'll start by considering an intellectual motivation for this claim. And Julian said that we might bring out the argument for design. Bring out I will. See evidence for God in the world around us is the name of the game. So why does God exist? Why does the universe exist rather than not? Why does it exist according to physical laws that are dependable, testable, and rationally intelligible? Why are the fundamental constants of nature so sensitive that a difference on the smallest scale of their values would prevent the formation of matter itself? We live in a biosphere that has the exact conditions necessary for life to exist. We see fine-tuning on every scale of the universe. The composition of the Earth's crust and core, atmospheric temperatures, the oxygen-rich atmosphere, solar radiation shielding from the magnetic field from the nickel-iron core of the Earth, the abundance of liquid water, the size of the and orbit of the Moon, our position in the solar system. I could go on and on. The Bible says in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. I believe that the natural world around us points strongly towards the existence of a creative intelligence that designed it. Now, don't get me wrong, we cannot, indeed must not, replace our science textbooks with Bibles. Science has gone a long way to describing the fundamental laws and principles that govern the world around us. However, should we now say that because we know how a car engine works, that we need not believe in the existence of the man that designed it? Certainly not. That would be to confuse mechanism with agency or designer. The very hallmarks of a designer can be seen in the world around us. Secondly, as has also already been brought up, and being very predictable, of suffering and morality. The Bible presents God as loving, just, and merciful. Christians are commanded to act justly and to love mercy. If the world and everything around us is here by accident, by chance, then there is no overall purpose for our existence. As such, morality must be relative. And my subjective morality, my understanding of justice, is just as valid as the next person's. People are living in extreme poverty across the globe. The Ebola virus is devastating countries in East Africa. The genocides in Rwanda, in Cambodia, and currently in the Middle East. The fact that the entire world went to war twice within the last century. Why is it that we feel that these things are absolutely wrong or unjust? Why do we rejoice when we hear of corrupt bankers being exposed, when criminals are captured, tried and sentenced? Why do we care so much? We instinctively declare things to be wrong, even from an early age. I have it on good authority from my parents that my favourite phrase when I was young was, "That's not fair." The Bible says that we have been made in the image of God, and that we have been built, have built into us the same objective sense of morality, the same thirst for justice. Oxford academic and Christian theologian C.S. Lewis said, "A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of what a straight line is." And so this begs the question, why do we see suffering in the world at all? The Bible characterises the root of this problem as a broken relationship with God. However, without this belief, the problem of suffering still exists, and pastorally, it's no use deferring to, well, it's bad luck. God has created a perfect world, the Garden of Eden, where man was in a perfect relationship with him, and when mankind chose to rebel, there entered all the brokenness and injustice we see around us. God could have left us alone, or could have wiped the slate completely clean, but instead, he chose to be loving. He chose to be merciful, and he chose to be just. He chose to step into the fray, not with power, authority and might, but as a vulnerable baby. I've lost my vision. A rebellion has been staged, and punishment must be awarded, justice must be done. Yet instead of making us pay the price for our actions, he took it upon himself, he took it upon himself on the cross, where he displayed his rich love and mercy to the world. Jesus died so that we might come into a relationship with the one that created us. He proved his power to achieve such a feat by rising from the dead 3 days later, and that is why the cross and the resurrection is the central argument against the notion that God is a delusion. So let us not make, as they rightly said, a mistake tonight in what we're debating over. Let us debate over the nature and person of God which Christianity presents.
I'm done. Of this auditorium to cover with one mic. So if you cover that side, I'm going to cover this side. Okay? So I'm going to cover, you pass it to me if somebody indicates over here. There's two ways you can get my attention. One is by tweeting, and one is by putting your hand up. If you're tweeting, you've got an advantage because I can see if you've got an interesting question. So there we are. Get onto your phones and get onto the hashtag. First one, I'm going to go to the cameraman.
Thank you. I didn't find your explanation for the problem of evil very satisfying, because your argument is about when you came to the argument about original sin and that we fell away from God, but surely that's a bit like if my great grandfather was a murderer and I got punished for it. I mean, what Adam and Eve did doesn't have any bearing on what I do, so that doesn't. Sorry, I don't find the lost it, but do you get what I'm saying? It's not a very satisfying argument.
So anybody from that side? But use mic too.
I understand. I guess it is unfair that something that happened long ago, before I was even born, decides the reality of my existence now, decides the parameters of my existence now. But it is still true, I would argue, that it is within our nature to be selfish, that it is within our person to cause all the things which have been outlined, I guess, on both sides now, all the different atrocities and terrible things that go across the world. And I think looking at that in a perspective now, I think I would say that, well, we can argue where it's come from or how it's come to be here, but it's still the case that we are living in a world where suffering and injustice is still apparently still there and with us today. And I think that Christianity, looking at that, is the only outlook which satisfies that with a reasonable answer.
Okay, thanks. Are you going to respond here?
Stick this on. Right.
You don't get this one, Timber.
No. Well, the problem is, as you brought up, really, it's that just saying that we have free will justifies all the atrocities in the world, from the Boxing Day tsunami killing hundreds of thousands of people, from the death of newborn children who have absolutely no responsibility over their own actions, from the endless natural disasters, from the endless torments that suffer everyone in the world. Just saying that we have free will isn't really enough of an answer. And I just want to bring up a specific point of why. Imagine you're born in the 5th century as opposed to the 20th century or 21st century. You have no access to the modern medicine you'd have now. You have no access to antibiotics. You have no access to refrigeration, no access to gene therapy. You don't have to eat clean water or healthy food to actually live longer. So why is it that if you're born in the 5th century, you're condemned to a much shorter life than we are? I mean, even by the art logic, then we should both be equally culpable.
Okay, yeah, okay, we're going to move on. So, those people tweeting. Rob Davis, where's Rob Davis? Actually, I can. So I like it. I like it. I've got a. I was theatre trained and I've been teaching a long time. Can you read out your tweet, please? So I like the question.
Why should billions of people suffer because 2 people gave into temptation?
Okay.
Can I have a whack at that? So, the issue of suffering has come up all over the place, and it's true. We can't deny that the world is not as it should be. And even today, yes, we have gene therapy, yes, we have hospitals, and these are wonderful things, and yet we're not free from we're not free from tsunamis, we're not free from disease. Christians are not unaware of this. Christians are not immune from this either. And so the answer is, or rather the question is, what do we do with this? And the Christian worldview, the Christian answer, is that the world isn't as it should be. You're right. Whereas if we take a humanist perspective, an atheist perspective, I think, please do correct me if I don't say something that's true. I think it's fair to say that you can't say things aren't as they should be.
Okay.
I don't think that follows. I'm not sure why you would say that. I mean, of course, we can say perhaps it's not an absolute morality, but we can say reasonably well, this is how it should be, and it's a shame that it's not. We can do our best to try and make it that way.
How will humanists stop tsunamis?
We're moving on. Where's Becky? Becky, right, take the one ahead. You're a great advantage because I like it.
That was true.
Okay, so my question is, if God is a delusion, then is unproven science also a delusion?
We're not coming to this. We're just going to go for this side. We're not going to go forwards and backwards. We'll change it around. So, response there. I did say join in, don't just watch. So, next one will be hands up. I'm just going to go for potluck.
The difference between unproven science and God is that unproven science is a hypothesis. The Christian God conflicts with what we know about the world. One is a false belief, one is something yet to be tested.
Okay, wait, I have a hand. Yes, what's that?
Hi, thanks guys. I think you guys have missed the point of this question, well, in my understanding anyway. I think obviously you guys have your own agendas. You guys believe in Jesus and the Bible and stuff, you guys don't. I just want to know, what is it do you think makes them believe in God? Yeah? Rather than, I think you're talking about why God doesn't exist, rather than what do you think makes them think that they believe in this delusional idea of God. And for you guys, like, what makes you not delusional, if you know what I mean? I feel like you guys are not actually getting to the question, rather you're just talking about just all these abstract things about why God doesn't exist and why God does, if I'm making sense. I hope I am.
I sort of didn't project very well last time, so I apologise. I understand that we've taken the question to mean, obviously not that God is delusion in any literal sense, but that belief in God is not justified. And of course, there are very good secular and theological defences of faith. And I'm not going to go into the defence of faith. I think faith underpins a lot of very important advances in science. Uniformity of nature is a particularly good example. How do we know that the sun will rise tomorrow? But we can't be absolutely certain. We have reasonable evidence to believe that it will. Of course, people can have reasonable beliefs. They can believe that God is there, God is true. I'm not going to doubt that they're very sincere about those sorts of beliefs, and perhaps we might best consult religious experience or genius, the numinous. I think that's a very important source of religious belief, and I'm not going to doubt that wholly. I can say, well, I don't think it's very practical, but that doesn't mean I should disregard it. If that answers your question.
Okay. Point of view for this side, so you can address both sides.
When it comes to delusion, I think it would be fair to say that if we were sitting here telling you that something was absolutely certainly true and you should devote your life to it, that was obviously not true. That would be a delusion. So by presenting you with evidence from history of Jesus' life, death and resurrection, what we're trying to do is show you that there's reasonable evidence for what we believe to be true. And not only reasonable evidence, but enough evidence to stake your life on it. So when you propose to someone, you can't scientifically prove or mathematically prove that it's a good thing to devote your life to, and yet you know enough to be able to. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to show you enough. And say, dig, look for yourselves, look at the Bible, look at the evidence. Don't have blind faith, because that's stupid. But look at the evidence. That's what we're trying to do.
Okay. There's something on Twitter keeps coming up. How will humanists stop tsunamis? Okay, so I'm going to ask, how Christians stop tsunamis? Tsunamis, right.
Right, I'm going to try and very slightly modify the question to make it actually answerable. And not just, obviously, we could build 50-foot walls, but I'm not entirely sure how well that would work. The question should be, how should we tackle evil? How should we approach evil in the world? And I think there's two ways to approach it. First of all, man-made, humans aren't perfect. Humans can be selfish, humans can be cowardly, humans can be reckless, humans can be unkind, humans can be cruel. But humans can be just, and humans can be brave, and humans can be loving, humans can actually do great things. I mean, that's how we're all in this room in the 21st century living in a country with 65 million people all working together towards our own end, and yet still making such great things as charity, as hospitals, as education. So we can approach these evils by just coming together as a group, and I think it's an important part of humanism, coming together as humans and working with other humans in order to act and in order to do charitable things and in order to help everyone else.
Okay, thanks. So, tsunamis, what's your response?
Isaac, that's your field, mate.
I won't go into the physics of tsunamis, but they're quite interesting. I guess so. You asked the question in terms of how would you approach the problem of evil?
No, they asked the question.
Or is it what? It's a rephrased question of the question. Yeah, how would you approach the problem of evil? Well, I think that the Christian response undoubtedly would probably go back to Christ, Christian Christ. We'd go back to the belief in Christ. So when Chris is talking about like having enough faith to believe in, have the faith to believe in it and stake your life on it, it's not just having, for me, I'm a physicist, having enough evidence and then going, well, that's probably true and that's the best answer. It also involves a personal experience. So the idea of a proposal is actually quite a good example in that we don't just believe that Jesus is the best answer. We believe that we know him personally. And in that knowing him, that changes our hearts, that changes who we are as a person. I can say categorically, I'm a different person to who I was before I was a Christian.
What about the tsunami? How does that affect your view of the tragedy of communities being decimated by tsunamis, being a Christian?
Being a Christian, well, I'm a big fan of saying I don't know. But in that, I will say that there's lots of injustice in the world, and we wouldn't deny that. But I believe that God is just, and that in that, He won't make a judgment. He won't do something which is unjust on account of those people who have a worse off chance at knowing Jesus or knowing God just as a result of the tsunami. I think God is bigger than that.
Okay. Now, the people up there, I assume you didn't really want to ask a question because you sat up there, or you just came a bit late. So you get the next question if you have one up there. Anybody? No? Okay. Okay, we're going to go to the far end somewhere. Somewhere at the top end. Somebody slid in. The one furthest back. Is there a question on the back row? I can't quite see. Next row down. Next row down. No, we got one in the back row.
You were assuming that most of wars or problems because of belief or whatever. But don't you think that even if we all didn't believe in God, people will still fight for money, power, politics, or any other things?
Okay. Both sides. We'll go over here first.
Okay. First of all, I don't really, in all honesty, I think a lot of wars aren't for, a lot of wars are purportedly fought in the name of religion. Crusades are a good example of this, but really are actually fought for greed, are fought for money, are fought for power. The thing is, Christianity and all religions, frankly, can be made, and all political ideologies, all doctrines of these fundamental dogmatic kind, can be used to justify these completely immoral vices, can be used to justify horrendous things. But I struggle to find it easy to do that with humanism. I mean, to take A.T. Gray, who had to speak with us on Monday, to plug that event again, to take his position on it, to be a good humanist is to essentially be a good house guest. It's to be kind to other people, it's to be thankful, and it's to be happy to simply be there and provide good conversation and discourse. Now from that, it's very hard to justify, for example, a massive slaughter of people in different regions, the same way the Islamic State are, or for the same way that in Myanmar is happening to Buddhists. It's very difficult from a humanist perspective to justify the atrocities you were stating, but from a Christian perspective, or from any dogmatic perspective, then it becomes very easy to.
Oh, that's it. Well, so he says from a Christian perspective, it's easy to justify. So is it?
So recently I read a quote by the author John Green, who wrote that the problem is not, I'm going to paraphrase him, the problem is not religion, the problem is not humanism, the problem is the human heart. And I think that really accurately sums up the Christian position. Like, yes, there is religion and it has been used to justify terrible wars and terrible atrocities that are happening all over the world, but I don't think the problem is God. I think the problem is sinful man taking God and justifying his own selfish intentions. So I think, that's where I'll leave that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was an elected politician, but I'm not anymore. But one is. So, Rachel, can you ask your question you just tweeted, please?
Yeah, do you want me to speak in a moment?
Yeah, it's coming.
Okay, so if ECU has talked a lot about how God provides them purpose, and they've used justice as an understanding of that, I wonder what provides AHS with purpose of life and justice, and where justice fits into that.
Well, in terms of humanism, the very idea of humanism is human solidarity. I think it's that the idea that I think is underlying your question is a slightly patronising one, that we can't be moral without God. Correct me if I'm wrong, but and I think that humanism is a very fulfilling belief, worldview, not belief, for goodness sake, whereby you treat other people as sympathetically as you can, you engage with the world rationally, and rely upon evidence rather than wishful thinking or supposition. And I think that's a much better model for dealing with people of a multiplicity of beliefs and none than a simple, narrow religious view would be.
Okay, thanks. So there's a challenge at the back from Charlie for ECU.
Hello, this isn't directly related to the motion, but what I'm asking is, if Islamism is the idea that Islam should be forced upon the world and forced upon the human race, then is evangelism any different?
You mean Christian evangelism?
Yeah, Christian evangelism.
So what's the difference between Christian evangelism and Islamic evangelism?
Well, wonderful question. Two sides to this. One is that Muslims, again, Muslims, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that Muslims believe that you can force someone to convert.
Is there anybody... Is there any Muslims in there?
No, you can't.
You can't? In which case, scrap that. I'm sorry, I read that somewhere else, must have been wrong. In which case, the second point is, if you knew that I honestly thought that people who didn't believe in Jesus were going to hell, and then I didn't tell anyone about this, that would be very selfish on my part. That would be very crude on my part. If the world is heading to judgment and there's one salvation, and I don't tell people about that, then what am I doing? How selfish am I being? If I had £1 million and kept it to myself, that'd be quite selfish.
What's the difference between Islamic evangelism and Christian evangelism? They may feel the same way, that they have the true way, the one way. What's the difference?
Probably different in technique and content, but
Hope so.
Again, I hope so too. I think the main difference is between Christianity and all other religions is that Christianity is grounded in history. We say that there's one event that proves God, that is the cross and resurrection of Christ, and that's historically testable. We look at it, we test it, is it true, is it not? Christianity lives or falls on that. Whereas Islam, it's much more difficult to historically test, because there's no one event like that.
Okay, well, there's a number of comments that the women are excluded from Christianity, so I'm going to take a punt to you and ask you a question about something. Go on.
Going back to what you kept saying earlier about God being just, that may be true for the New Testament God, but in the Old Testament he is often not just or merciful at all. Like he strikes down people for touching the Ark of the Covenant, he does things like that. Wouldn't the fact that God changes over time, is that not a human thing to do? So would that not show that we as humans are creating him in our image instead of the other way around?
I think they're going to first go to comments on your question and then they'll respond.
This is a very good question, which is why I'm very happy. The essential idea is, I think it's very much to quote Xenophon, is if horses had God, they'd look like horses. If man had God, they'd look like men. It's very much interesting just how much God justifies what's happening at the time. In the Old Testament, God justifies there's no other way around it, genocide of tribes like the Midianites. God smites people for looking back in cities, in the case of turning a woman to a pillar of salt outside the city of Lot. But even as you go forward in time, you still have the same oppression and the same extreme conservatism of doing what the Christian church says or else. When it comes to even Jesus saying, I do not come to bring peace, but I come to bring a sword, to split brother from father from son.
Okay, that's it. Just restate your question for this side, please. Just say it again. Just deliver it at the end.
So the fact that God changes over time from the Old Testament to the New Testament, that's a humans change, so the fact that he changes like a human, would that show that we as humans created him in our image instead of the other way around?
No, it's a very good question. It's something I struggled with, especially when I was looking at Christianity from outside of it. So you mentioned about the man who touched the Ark of the Covenant, where the Ten Commandments were kept in, and he was struck down by lightning. The man's name is not important to this debate. But it illustrates the point that God is a quality called holy. He is a quality called holy in that he is without imperfection, without anything bad in him. And when we chose to step from God, to go back to the Garden of Eden, when we chose to step away, we moved ourselves away from this holiness, this quality of being in a perfect state.
Okay. I'm going to go for another woman on this side. Yes.
This is for the humanists. How do you explain Isaac's point when he was speaking, that there are so many natural things, creation, exactly as they need to be for life to exist?
Okay, in response to someone, I mean, it said the argument is, how can everything be so perfectly designed? I bring up the example that Darwin brought up of the ichneumon, which is a small little parasite that's found in around Central America, if I remember right. And the way it works, the way it lives, is it just burrows into your skin and lives just underneath your skin layer. And then it lays its eggs. So when its newborns are hatched, it has a live supply of food. And so to get out and to develop and grow, basically eat their way out of your skin. That's caused immense pain, immense suffering, and in 90% of cases causes blindness. What purpose does that serve? What end does that serve? How could Isaac, or how could existence of animals which have almost seen as their purpose to burrow their way into human skin cause extreme agony and blindness?
Okay, Isaac, what's your answer?
I would say that argument sort of mixes up two things, the suffering and the idea that the world was created perfect at one point. We can see design and order and beauty and symmetry in the way the world looks around us because it was created perfectly, it was created to be like that. Obviously we can tell now that it's not so because of the burrowing insect thing. So we can see that's not so it's confusing the idea that fine-tuning means that everything around us is fine-tuned and beautiful now. It's not. The world is in a fallen state. The world is not as it's supposed to be.
Okay, Jasmine, where are you? You're there. On the Twitter. Yeah, a bit further on. Read that one out if you would. So that's for this side first?
I guess so.
And then a comment from over there.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just going to read out what I put. To say that Islam has no historical foundation is just totally ignorant, because there's a whole science of working out how accurate the hadith accounts are, called isnad, just talking about how the stories get passed down from one person to another and how accurate the witnesses are.
Okay, so your question is that other faiths have equal trails of validity. What's your response?
So, three-part answer. One, I think I meant what I said, but I phrased it very poorly. In the sense that what I meant when I said the difference between Christianity and Islam is the historical nature. I didn't mean that Islam has no history or anything like that. Clearly, Muhammad was a guy who lived, who died, similarly to Jesus, only did not again, interestingly. But when I say he has no history, or rather Islam has no history, what I mean is that Christianity is cemented in one event. If Jesus lived, died, and rose again, then we can say that Jesus is God. Whereas with Muhammad, we know that he was a guy, we know that he wrote down a number of things, we know he said a number of things, and we have records of those things. But how do we know to trust him or not? We know we can trust Jesus if he died and rose again, because men don't just do that. Muhammad's slightly different.
Okay, Muhammad's slightly different? Is he?
Yeah, I'm not sure what this part is really.
Well,
your quote was...
we're looking at other faiths.
No. Your quote was, Christianity is the only religion grounded in history. I'm not sure what that means. Obviously there are religions, Miki Kwek thought systems, which go back, predate Christianity by several thousand years. I'm not sure what it means to say that there has to be a single event to cement history. I don't think that's a very good working criterion of history. And also there are no real good secular sources on the Bible, and there are competing claims within biblical testimony, particularly the Gospel of Judas, which compete against those other sources.
5 minutes to go. One by the front. Yes, very confident hand.
Sorry, this is to the Christians. You said that the Earth is very finely tuned for human life, but the universe is a very big place, so it's not a huge surprise that life exists in the universe. And the fact, by virtue of the fact that we're alive, we have to live on a planet which could sustain life. So it's not a surprise at all, is it?
Okay, is it? Is it a surprise?
I like physics. So we could do a statistical argument and say, oh, we need this, you need this, you need water, you need light, you need blah, 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 blah. So you could go on forever, and we could form different arguments, and we could say, well, it's more likely this way, more likely this way. But as things stand at the moment, we haven't found life anywhere else in the universe. We haven't found any of the civilizations, any of the examples of it. So I think maybe I might retreat into the corner and say, when we find life, I'll address the question again.
Okay. Just over here, you put your hand up very persistently, so the reward is you get the mic.
Okay. Well, I have two questions, but I'll ask one of them. It was like adding on to the life on other planets thing. There's a lot of physicists. I do physics as well, but I'm first year, so you probably know more than me anyway.
Not necessarily.
A lot of people who look into this stuff, I don't know the name for them, they like a conclusion, they sort of like said that there's a high chance with the the billions and billions and billions and billions of planets and star systems and galaxies, etc., that are out there. There is a good chance that there could be life on other planets, but the light's not had time to reach us. We can't see it, we can't judge it. So if there is life on other planets, would they be following Christianity as well?
Okay, good question. And then you get to respond to what they say.
Well, yeah, I think they probably would be, because if God brought Jesus to us and God came as Jesus to us, He'd come as Jesus to them as well. But the point is, I don't think so anyway. I don't think that they would exist anyway. Because of the fact that, for example, you go to biology, coming out of my remit now, that the mechanisms for which life arose and which species arose from non-biological matter isn't understood. There's no kind of defined mechanism for how life arose in the first place. We have things to do with evolution and how species emerge from one different thing, but how that one thing arose in the first place is not kind of understood, especially within science at the moment.
Good question. So, are there gods on other planets? Maybe. Is it the same God as their gods?
Well, I think the fact that not everyone on this planet has heard the good news yet, I say that surprisingly, surely implies that this method of delivery from God was at least imperfect. So, might have spread word to other planets. I sincerely doubt it, because Christianity is man-made, but if you support the hypothesis that God exists, then I'm sure not all, but some of the people on another planet would know about it.
Okay. I think we're going to go to the summing up, because we're just about there. So we've got 2, and it's 2 minutes each. Let me read the motion. Now the trick with summing up is that you've got to reflect what's been said in the debate, and it's you two guys got the hardest speeches, so I've made them harder by insisting they're 2 minutes each. So 2 minutes. So we're going to go to this side first. So we've got Stephen.
Okay, I'm going to try and squeeze this entire debate down into 2 minutes. The debate only lasted an entire hour. In fact, it could last many more than that. But I'll try and bring it down to a few small, quick points. First of all is the question of historicity of the Bible. Now, what we've heard from the opposition is that the Bible is on time. In other words, the authors came out at the same time, because, for example, Plato was published 900 years later. We have other authors published dozens of generations later. But we know the Bible only came about 30, 40, 50, 60 years after the fact. Now, if your first source is 40, 50, 60 years after the fact, you start questioning it. You start questioning how historically accurate it is. And we know it's because we know the Bible has inconsistency where, over time, stories are added and added and added. In fact, we know a lot of the later books were actually taken out just because they were so late, people didn't have much reliability in them. We also brought up the idea of secular sources. The opposition said there are people like Josephus and Tacitus who both argue that secular justification of the Bible. We said they're not. If you really want to get more into that, we don't have the time. But the fact of the matter is the Bible isn't a historically accurate source. The second thing that's brought up was the fine-tuning of the universe. Now, I learned phrase in a very simple way. The opposition has said there's good design of the universe. Well, we've said there's bad design of the universe. The good side is that life exists. The bad side is that the life is so animalistic, so barbaric, so treacherous, so violent, so unjust, so cruel, that it simply cannot be called good. That's the 2 sides of this design argument. And the third one is morality. Can we be good without God? The opposition has said put faith in God. We're saying put faith in yourself. We're saying you have to... The opposition is saying that God is where justice comes from. We're saying that we can create justice ourselves. We know how to be just. We know how to be brave. We know how to be kind. We simply need to enact these virtues. We shouldn't be taking virtues from a book which promotes, as I brought up, genocide, a book that promotes, as I brought up, the idea of splitting up families.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Speaking against this God, believes that God is a delusion. This house believes that God is a delusion, is Miki.
So a lot has been said about the historicity of the Bible, and I think that's quite important to look at, because we are arguing that Jesus was a historical figure, and his death and resurrection can be proven again. Our entire argument hinges on the fact that the divinity of Jesus demonstrated through his resurrection, and that's what points us to the existence of God. Jesus cannot be divine if there was no God, and because he is divine, God is no delusion. So I wanted to go back to the point where you mentioned that we can question the accuracy of the Bible because it was written 30, 40, 50 years after the events happened. Well, these same witnesses died for their faith later. Let's not forget that these Christians were the ones who were persecuted by the Romans, by even Jews themselves. You know, if Jesus didn't come back from the dead and was seen by these the Bible talks about the 500 people who saw Jesus after his resurrection, why did they die for it? Why didn't they just kind of, I think it's quite easy to take for granted, like the martyrdom of, we talk about, saint this, saint that, they died for this, they died for that, but these were humans just like us. Would you die for something false? I think that's, let's think about them as, humans just like us. And sort of morality. I don't believe that, I actually agree that you don't have to have religion to be a good person. I think we all live by a set of codes, one way or another, whether it's in the name of common decency or human rights. You don't need religion to be a good person. What I would argue is that it does go back to Jesus, and the thing that distinguishes Christianity from other religions is that we're not saying, you need religion to be a good person. We're saying that, we are inherent, there is a problem with the world. We talked about that this evening. But Jesus is the one that provides that hope, and we shouldn't discount the hope that we have in him. Like, I don't think we should discount the emotion that rises within us at the feeling of hope, because I don't think being rational. The human experience is not just about being rational. Emotions are part and parcel of what being human is. Thank you.
We can't count. So we're going to divide the house in the old-fashioned way. So if you believe that God is a delusion, you're going to move and sit on this side of the room. God damn it! We can't count, and I want a result that we can trust. On this side, if you believe that God, this house believes that God is a delusion, if you're against that, move over here. If these guys move up that side of the room, if these guys move up
Look after the camera, whoever sits here. Cheers.
People up there, you can join in or you can watch, I don't mind. If you're in the right place tonight. You don't need to be saying spot that side. So keep still, do not move, and don't forget to count yourself and these people beside you. And over here you're going to be counted by...
Again,
You don't have to count all at once, but it's a lot easier, and the people at the back, you're going to let them see the people sat behind you.
Are you guys voting here?
Yeah, you're voting, they're voting, they're on that side. Yeah, they have a chance to move. You can sort of see it, can't you? That's the advantage of this. You don't have to, we know we're dodgy counters without the discipline of VegSoc. So we'll try and get a number this time.
There's a few people hidden.
Yeah, if you're not seen, you don't get counted. Have you got a figure? You can't don't forget these guys and you.
That's 69.
69. Oh, you're going to be closer. About 85. About 85? 85, okay. 69. Support the motion. This house believes that God is a delusion. And about 85. This house believes that God is not a delusion. So thank you very much for taking part and just indulging me in my lack of confidence in counting lots of people. I taught for a long time in schools and in colleges, but I was never very good at counting. Thank you for the speakers. Who took part not just by asking questions, making comments and making little noises, but just for paying attention. So if you're around next year, you'll see me around. Come and say hi. The people who said something, I've followed you on Twitter, follow me back and we'll see if we can have a conversation online or another time. Thanks very much for coming. You've got lots to do.